All right, let's kick things off with an idea that might just change the way you think about programming forever. I want you to forget all the stereotypes, the ones you've seen in movies, because we're going to explore this idea that programming, at its very core, isn't really about writing code at all. It's about investigating. I mean, seriously, when you picture a programmer at their desk, what do you actually see them doing for like 8 hours a day? It's one of those jobs that's wrapped up in a whole lot of mystery and some pretty powerful cliches. Is this the image that pops into your head? The classic Hollywood hacker. Fingers are just a blur across the keyboard, green text is scrolling like a waterfall, and they're just, I don't know, pouring out flawless, brilliant code from thin air. Well, yeah, about that. That image is pretty much completely wrong. The real definition, the actual heart of the work, is something else entirely. It's the act of investigation. It's not about typing. It's not about creating something out of nothing. It's this deep, methodical process of discovery. So what on earth are they investigating? Well, this idea of investigation isn't just one single thing. It really breaks down into two main kinds of work that define the entire job. The first is all about finding what's broken, and the second, that's about finding out how to build something in the first place. So let's look at these two modes. On one side of the coin, you've got debugging. This is reactive. Something is wrong. The code won't build, the app crashes, there's a weird bug. Your job is to become a detective, right? You're hunting down clues to find the source of the problem. But then, on the other side, you've got research. This is proactive. You have a goal, we need to build this new feature, but you don't have a map. So your job is to search, to experiment, to try things, and basically carve out a path to get it done. Okay, so how much of a programmer's time do you think is spent doing these two types of investigation? The answer is kind of shocking. It's 90%. Yeah, you heard that right. Let that sink in for a second. The huge majority of the job is not typing. It's thinking, searching, and solving problems. So you see that tiny little 10% sliver? That's the part we all see in the movies, the furious typing. But the real work, all the intellectual heavy lifting, it's in that massive 90% chunk. I mean, think about it. Any task you already know how to do, you'll finish it almost instantly. The actual job is everything else. And this brings us to a really, really interesting, kind of counterintuitive idea. If programming is all about investigating things you don't already know, then that feeling of being stuck, that's not a sign you're failing. It's actually a sign you're doing your job right. Let me tell you a quick story that perfectly shows how this works in the real world. Just picture a senior developer walking over to a junior programmer's desk and asking that simple question, "Hey, how's it going?" And the junior developer, maybe they're a little bit nervous, they say, "To be honest, I'm stuck. I've been staring at this thing for a while and I just can't figure this part out." Now, in most other jobs, that would sound like an alarm bell, right? A signal that something's wrong. So, what do you think? Is this junior developer actually failing? Are they just not cut out for this job because they're admitting they don't know the answer?
The answer is a hard no. Not even close. In fact, a good senior developer hears that and thinks, excellent. You are exactly where you're supposed to be. Because being stuck, being faced with a problem you don't immediately have the answer to, that is the work. That's the normal, everyday, productive state for a programmer.
So what this really means is we have to completely redefine what being stuck is. It's not a roadblock that's stopping you from doing your job. It's the road itself. It's the active, ongoing state of wrestling with the unknown, and that's the absolute heart of the intellectual labor that programming demands. Okay, so I can hear you thinking, wait a minute. If the entire job is just being stuck in investigating all day, doesn't that sound incredibly frustrating? And you know what? It absolutely can be. But that constant struggle is also the very thing that makes the work so engaging and, ultimately, so rewarding. Just compare it to a really simple, repetitive job for a second. In those jobs, you do the same thing over and over and over. It's predictable, sure, but for a lot of people, that can get really boring really fast. Programming is the exact opposite. It's like an endless supply of new puzzles. Every single problem is different, and it's constantly forcing you to think and to learn. It all kind of boils down to this.
In this job, you are always, always facing the unknown. Why? Because any problem you already know the answer to is solved in a flash. It's done. The real work is confronting what you don't know. It's a purely mental exercise, not some kind of manual labor. And that trouble, that feeling of being stuck on a tricky problem, that's what makes the puzzle so compelling in the first place.
And that really is the entire philosophy wrapped up in a single sentence. You're a programmer not because of the stuff you already know, but because you have an ability to systematically figure out what you don't know. The second a problem becomes known, it stops being your primary job. Which leads us to one last question to think about. After looking at it this way, as this constant investigation, is programming just a super frustrating task? Or is it an endlessly rewarding puzzle? The answer seems to be that it's both. And maybe that contradiction is exactly what makes it so special. Thanks for joining me for this explainer.